a podcast or, someone right there talking to you.
Hmm.
And it just hits you. It's not just about knowing the words themselves. It's the speed, the way sounds seem to, well, disappear or just morph together.
Hmm.
The rhythm,
Yeah.
the way they just know how to start and end a conversation, how to flow. It feels, I don't know, miles away from the sort of clean, predictable English you might find in a textbook.
Absolutely. And that gap you're talking about between classroom English and real, spoken, everyday English, that can feel like a huge barrier for learners. It really can.
Yeah, a barrier is exactly the right word.
Because traditional learning builds crucial foundations, focusing on grammar rules, building those vocabulary lists. And that stuff is necessary, absolutely vital.
Of course.
But it doesn't always replicate the messy, dynamic, sometimes surprising nature of how people really talk in everyday life.
Messy is a good word for it.
Yeah. The hesitations people have, the way sounds link or change completely, the meanings that aren't spoken but are just implied. Those cultural assumptions baked right into casual chat. That's the real talk that can make just understanding feel, well, overwhelming sometimes.
And that's exactly what this deep dive is all about today. We've had this fantastic opportunity to really comb through a truly remarkable collection of source material.
It's quite something, isn't it?
It really is. Think of it like, I don't know, an X-ray into the architecture of everyday conversation. We're talking about stacks and stacks of real-world dialogues. They cover this huge spectrum of common situations you run into constantly.
Everything under the sun, almost.
Pretty much. Everything from just, buying something or making a quick phone call to navigating public transport, handling small problems or even minor emergencies.
Right.
Managing life within a family, which is a whole world in itself, and all those crucial social interactions, introducing people, making apologies, asking for help, you name it.
And these interactions, they might seem mundane when you look at them one by one. Ordering coffee, asking for directions.
Yeah, the small stuff.
The small stuff. But they are the absolute foundation of daily life. And they have their own patterns, their own, you could say, unwritten rules. There's a certain flow that helps people achieve a purpose.
A purpose like?
Well, whether that's getting information, resolving a problem, getting something done, or simply connecting with another person on some level. Our mission today really is to deep dive into these conversations.
Okay.
Yes, we'll definitely pull out some key phrases, the practical stuff you can use. But the real goal, I think, is to uncover the underlying structure, the communication strategies, the choreography that's kind of hiding in plain sight within these real-world exchanges.
The choreography, I like that.
Yeah.
So we want to give you, the listener, a kind of shortcut, a way to see how these conversations actually work, how they're put together.
Exactly. So you can step into them yourself feeling hopefully a bit more prepared, more confident, and maybe less overwhelmed by the speed and the messiness.
Right. It's really about helping you navigate everyday life with a bit more ease. Whether you're, dealing with someone at a service counter, talking to a doctor, connecting with family, or just having a casual chat with a friend down the street.
And it's worth stressing, all the insights we're discussing today, they come directly from analyzing these diverse, authentic dialogues. This isn't just theory. It's based on how people actually talk.
It's about understanding the system then, not just collecting isolated pieces of language.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's the system.
Okay, so let's unpack this. To really get a sense of this real talk, maybe we can start with something specific from these dialogues. Something that immediately shows how everyday conversation goes beyond just, facts and figures and reveals something deeper, maybe like a cultural quirk.
That's a great way in, actually, because it highlights perfectly how the language we use about just our daily lives, our routines, can reflect these broader cultural norms without us even realizing it sometimes. And one really fascinating point that came up in the material was from this interview with Charlie. He's originally from the UK, but lives in Australia now.
Right.
And he talked about this really striking cultural difference he noticed, related purely to daily routines. What time people get up, what time they go to bed.
Ah, yes, I remember reading that part. It was about the timing, right? His observation was that in Australia, people seem to get up very early and also go to bed really early, too.
Exactly that. He described it as a completely different shift compared to his experience in the UK, where, generally speaking, people tend to stay up later. This was something he noticed quite starkly after moving to Sydney.
A real culture shock almost, in just the daily rhythm.
You could say that. And there was this nice little moment in the source material where one of the other hosts, Lucy, she responded to this observation.
Oh yeah, what did she say?
Well, Lucy mentioned that she actually goes to bed quite early herself. And she explained it's partly influenced by her husband, Will, who used to be a farmer.
Ah, okay, that makes sense.
Right, because farmers naturally work according to daylight hours. So he'd go to bed early to be ready to work early, when the sun was actually out. So her personal routine, driven by a very practical reason, tied to a profession and the sun.
Aligned with that Australian pattern Charlie was talking about.
Exactly. Even if it wasn't necessarily for the same broader, maybe culturally driven reason that Charlie was speculating about.
That's interesting. But Charlie had a theory about why this pattern might exist in Australia, didn't he? It wasn't just about everyone being a farmer.
He did, yeah. He speculated and he admitted it might sound a bit odd, but he felt it was very much tied to the environment, specifically, as he put it, the climate and the power of the sun.
The power of the sun. How so?
Well, his feeling was that because the sun is so bright at like 5 or 6 a.m. that it just feels right to try and get up then. It's almost this visceral feeling, he suggested, driven by the intense early morning light, that he thinks underpins that whole early rising culture.
Wow. That's a really interesting insight, how something as fundamental as climate, the intensity of the sun, could potentially shape daily habits, and how those habits then surface in just simple conversations about what time you wake up.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And the sources back this up with a really concrete anecdote, one that perfectly illustrates the practical impact of this early schedule.
Oh, yeah. What was the story?
This is where it becomes really tangible for someone visiting or moving there. Charlie mentioned they were visiting his sister, I think on the Gold Coast, north of Sydney, and they wanted to get coffee around 2:00 p.m. one day.
Okay. Standard afternoon coffee time in many places.
You'd think so. But he said where his sister lived, all of the coffee shops were shutting at around 1:30.
1:30 in the afternoon. Wow. That's genuinely surprising.
It was a definite shock for them, a real wait, what moment. And the dialogue captures that reaction perfectly. Wow, I really didn't expect that. I thought it would be the other way around, expecting things to be open later, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. It completely flew in the face of their expectations about how an afternoon should work, based on living in a different culture.
And that small story, just shared in a casual chat about trying to get a coffee, it reveals so much more than just shop closing times, doesn't it?
It really does.
It highlights how these cultural differences around daily routines are embedded in the way people talk about their lives and how they have real-world effects, like, not being able to get your usual afternoon caffeine fix.
It shows that everyday talk isn't just abstract ideas. It's tied right into the concrete details of how people live their lives, what time they wake up, when they can get coffee.
Exactly. It's a perfect example of how listening deeply, really paying attention to these real conversations, can give you insights into a culture and its habits, all through discussions about seemingly mundane things like waking up times or coffee shop hours.
Okay, so we've seen how everyday conversation can reveal these subtle cultural nuances. That's fascinating. Let's pivot now to another aspect of real talk that the sources really delve into, something that directly impacts your ability to understand native speakers when they're talking quickly.
Yes.
The subtle, often unheard phonetic patterns. This feels key to breaking through that big barrier we mentioned right at the start, doesn't it?
It really is. This is where learners often hit a wall, I think. When trying to follow native speakers in movies or podcasts or just fast conversation, the source material specifically points out that features like dropping the T sound
Right.
or replacing it with what's called a glottal stop are crucial to understand because they are just part of how spoken English naturally flows. It's not wrong pronunciation. It's just efficient.
Efficient. Why does that happen? Why do people drop T's or change them like that?
Well, it's often about smoothing the connection between words, making it easier to say things quickly, especially when a T sound comes before a word starting with a consonant sound. Saying something like, the fact that they, with a really crisp, clear T on fact right before the sound in that, it's just harder. It's slower than modifying or even dropping that T sound altogether.
Right, it breaks the flow.
Exactly. The sources use that precise example, contrasting a sort of slow, deliberate pronunciation with the more natural flowing, the fact they. It's all about ease of articulation, really, making the language flow more smoothly when you're speaking at a natural pace.
So it's a feature of connected speech,
Yeah.
helping everything run together seamlessly.
Precisely. And you see it, or rather hear it in other examples from the dialogues too. Instead of hearing a very clear don't they with that strong T,
Uh-huh.
you'll often hear something much softer, more like don't they, or even just don they, where the T almost disappears. Or a phrase like go out. In rapid speech, that final T might become very soft, or link into the next vowel, go out, or get dropped before a consonant. It really depends on the context, the sounds around it.
And the glottal stop you mentioned, that's a bit different from just dropping the sound, isn't it?
It is, yes. The sources describe the glottal stop as actually replacing the T sound in certain positions. Often in the middle of words, like in butter or better in some accents, or sometimes at the end of a word before another sound.
How does it work? What is a glottal stop?
Instead of using your tongue tip up behind your teeth to make the T sound T, you briefly close your vocal folds right down in your throat. It momentarily stops the airflow. The sources describe it almost like a tiny voiced cough sound, but very quick.
Oh, okay. Like in button, some people say bun.
Exactly like that. Or better might sound more like beer with that little catch in the throat instead of a clear T or deed sound. While it's definitely prominent in certain regional accents, like Cockney in London,
Right.
the material makes the point that you actually hear glottal stops replacing T's in many varieties of spoken English, especially in informal quick speech. It's not just one specific accent doing it.
That's a great point. It's not just some weird regional thing. It's a feature of spoken English itself
Yeah.
in many places. So understanding that these phonetic shifts, dropping T's, using glottal stops, words linking together smoothly are normal, predictable patterns.
Mm.
That's key to improving listening comprehension, isn't it?
It's absolutely vital. If you're listening and you're expecting to hear every single consonant sound perfectly articulated, like you might hear in, say, very formal speech or some older language learning materials,
Yeah.
you're going to struggle when native speakers talk naturally because they don't always pronounce every sound distinctly. Recognizing these patterns, understanding why they happen usually for ease and flow, is a huge step towards decoding real talk. It's a prime example of those unspoken rules or patterns we're trying to unpack from these dialogues.
It's like learning the actual soundscape of the language as it's really used day to day, not just the dictionary pronunciation listed on a page.
Exactly. The music of the language, not just the notes.
Okay, that gives us a really solid foundation on how real talk can differ both culturally, in terms of habits reflected in conversation, and phonetically, in the actual sounds people make. Let's shift gears now towards the more practical side. The language you need for getting things done, navigating public spaces and services.
Right. This next segment really dives into the kind of language used for basic transactions and tasks when you're out and about. And a recurring theme you'll notice across these different scenarios is the importance of clear, specific communication. Often it involves following established procedures too.
Okay, where should we start? Maybe something that many people find a little bit nerve-wracking, especially in another language, making telephone calls.
Good starting point. The dialogues from the sources show the core structure of a simple phone interaction pretty clearly. You usually start by, well, identifying yourself or maybe asking who you're speaking to. Simple phrases like, hello, your name speaking, or this is your name, or perhaps, is that person's name? Then you state your purpose directly. Often this is by asking if the person you actually want to talk to is available. Is person's name in? Or could I speak to person's name, please?
Straightforward enough. But what if they aren't available? Which, as the source notes, happens quite a lot.
Yeah, very common. Then the person on the other end will typically tell you that and ask if you'd like to leave a message. Something like, sorry, he's not available right now. Can I take a message? Or would you like to leave a message?
Okay.
And the key here, which is really highlighted in the source material, is that when you do leave a message, being specific is absolutely crucial. You can't be vague.
So you don't just say, tell him I called or tell him to call me back.
Exactly. That's often not helpful enough. The example dialogue shows how to be precise. When he comes back, can you have him call me at your phone number? You give the essential information needed for the action.
And there's another crucial step shown in the dialogue, isn't there?
Yes, and it's so important confirmation. The person taking the message repeats the number back to you. They might say, okay, so that's phone number, or even ask, could you repeat that number again, please? Just to be absolutely sure they got it right.
That little confirmation loop is vital, isn't it? Especially on the phone, where you don't have those face-to-face cues to check understanding. Avoids major mix-ups later.
Absolutely. It's a small step that prevents big problems. That need for clarity and following a procedure, it extends right into navigating other services, like the post office. The sources cover various transactions you might handle there.
Like just buying basic things, stamps or postcards.
Yes, simple requests start the same way. I want to buy some postcards, or could I have 10 first-class stamps, please? Then confirming the price, $2 each. Okay. Paying, getting your change. That's standard transactional language, pretty straightforward, similar to any shop.
But sending things, especially parcels or registered letters, seems to involve a bit more specific language, according to the sources.
It does, yes. The language shifts to be more procedural, more specific to the task of sending. You might need to ask where to go for that particular service within the post office. Excuse me, which window should I go to for parcels?
Makes sense.
You need to specify how you want to send it. Options mentioned in examples include parcel post, airmail, or registered mail, if it's important. If you're sending a package, you often have to declare what's inside, especially for international mail.
Right, for customs.
Exactly. So you might say, there are 3 books inside, or it's just personal effects. You might also need to ask about additional services, like getting insurance if the item is valuable.
And the source material even points out a common mistake people make when sending packages.
It does. Forgetting the return address. One dialogue has the post office worker pointing it out. You forgot to put the return address on the package. It shows how this is prompted and why it's necessary so it can get back to you if there's a problem.
Practical stuff.
And the dialogues also include asking about those basic operational details like opening hours, what time do you close? Leading to the answer, our office hours are from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. These are just fundamental details you need to navigate the service successfully.
Okay, moving on to another essential service, the bank. Transactions there can feel a bit more complex, maybe higher stakes sometimes, but the underlying principle seems similar. You request a service, you follow a procedure.
That's exactly right. The sources provide clear examples of common requests you'd make at a bank counter. Things like, I'd like to withdraw some money from this account, stating the account maybe, or I'd like you to cash this check for $100, please. These phrases clearly state your intention and kick off the bank's internal process.
And that process often involves filling out forms and verifying your identity, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. The dialogues show the need to fill out withdrawal slips or deposit slips, providing essential information like your name, your account number, and the amount of the transaction. They even include those realistic little hiccups.
Like messing up your PIN.
Exactly, like entering a wrong password or PIN and having to ask, oh, sorry, can I try that again? It adds that layer of authenticity, showing things don't always go perfectly smoothly, even in routine transactions.
Very relatable indeed. We've all been there.
Haven't we just?
Right.
So once everything is processed correctly, the final steps usually involve signing a receipt and receiving your cash. And the dialogues even show you can specify how you want the money.
Oh, like asking for smaller hills?
Precisely. The example 10T will be fine likely means asking for the amount in $10 bills, or perhaps 20s, depending on context. It shows you can often specify the denominations you prefer.
That's useful to know.
Yeah.
And opening a completely new account, that's a specific procedure in itself.
It is. The dialogue example shows someone stating their purpose clearly right at the start. I'd like to open an account right now, please. They're then asked to specify the type, like a checking account or a savings account, and then they're informed about the requirements.
ID, proof of address, that sort of thing.
Usually, yes. Things like needing to provide identification are mentioned. It follows that very clear sequence. State your purpose, fulfill the requirements set by the bank, and then the action is taken. The language used directly mirrors the procedural nature of these banking interactions.
Okay, so we've covered some core errands calls, post office, bank. What about getting around? Public transport is absolutely essential for everyday life in many, many places. How do the dialogues capture that?
Oh, absolutely crucial. The sources break down the key questions and language needed for navigating both buses and subways, which often have slightly different systems. For buses, it's really all about figuring out your route and, importantly, any transfers.
Yeah, transfers can be tricky.
They really can. So fundamental questions are things like, does this bus go to your destination, or is this the right bus for place? And understanding transfers is key. The dialogues show how a staff, or maybe another helpful passenger might explain it. You have to get off at the specific stop or street and then take the number 39 bus.
And you can ask yourself, too.
Definitely. Asking preemptively, do I need to transfer, or will I need to change buses? Knowing the fare is obviously necessary. How much is the fare to that stop? Or just, What's the fare, please?
And tracking your journey while you're on the bus.
Yes, asking about the number of stops is useful. How many stops is it to your destination? You might also need information on how often the service runs, especially if you just missed one. Do you know how often the number 9 runs? Or asking where you can find schedules or timetables. The language here is primarily focused on gathering information efficiently so you can physically navigate your journey, get from point A to point B successfully.
And for the subway or underground. Similar goal, getting somewhere, but maybe different specifics in the language used.
Exactly. Still focused on getting where you need to go, but the language shifts slightly to deal with tickets, lines, and maybe station navigation. Asking for tickets to your destination station, confirming the cost. Some systems use tokens, so the dialogue might involve asking for those.
And using the ticket machines themselves can sometimes be a hurdle, especially if they're only in the local language.
True. The dialogues actually detail the process of using automated machines, describing inserting coins, pressing the right buttons for your destination or ticket type. They even include a practical tip from one conversation about what to do if you need change for the machine, suggesting you might need to go to a service window first.
That's a helpful real-world detail. And navigating the system underground, figuring out which line to take.
Yeah, that's often the core challenge, asking which line should I take for destination, or which platform is it for the southbound train? And understanding how to transfer between lines is key, getting instructions like take line 5 and transfer to line 1 at station name. Asking the total number of stops on your specific line is mentioned as a useful way to help you anticipate your arrival.
And someone gives some wise advice, too.
Yes, someone wisely suggests keeping the map in case you get lost. Always good advice on any unfamiliar transport system.
Definitely. So looking across these different practical scenarios, the phone calls, the post office, the bank, public transport, the standout pattern seems to be the power and really the necessity of asking clear, precise questions.
It really is, isn't it? You aren't just making noise, you're formulating and asking the specific question required to get the exact piece of information you need for that particular context, that specific task.
Right.
Whether it's the phone number for a callback, the specific mailing service you need, the amount you want to withdraw, or the correct bus route and transfer point, asking the right question demystifies the task and helps you move forward successfully. These dialogues effectively provide the templates for those crucial inquiries.
So it's less about speaking absolutely perfectly, grammatically perfect sentences, and more about asking effectively to get the job done, to get the information you need.
I think that's a huge part of functional communication in these settings, yes. Effective asking is key.
Okay, that covers some really essential public and practical scenarios. Let's dive into situations now where the language might get a bit more specific, perhaps involving tailored vocabulary related to, say, vehicles or personal services.
Right. This next segment explores contexts where the language naturally adapts to fit specific service industries. And sometimes, yeah, that includes a bit of jargon or specialized terms you need to understand. Taking a taxi is a good starting point here, fairly universal.
Okay, that feels pretty straightforward usually.
It often starts very simply, yes. Hailing the cab on the street or getting in at a taxi rank and then clearly stating your destination. Basic exchanges shown are taxi, heading to destination, please, or the driver asking where to, mate, or where would you like to go?
Simple enough.
Yeah.
And you can add a sense of urgency if you're running late for something.
You can. The source includes a phrase like, could you step on it, please? I'm running a bit late. Or, more simply, please hurry. The dialogues also touch upon how fares are calculated, which can vary.
Oh yeah, how so?
Explaining that they are often based on distance, maybe using kilometer rates. There might be a base rate, a flag fall, plus a cost per additional kilometer. This addresses that common question of, how exactly is the fare worked out? Understanding that helps you know if the final fare seems right.
That kind of practical detail embedded in the dialogue is really useful for learners. And paying at the end.
Usually a straightforward exchange, how much do I owe you? Or what's the damage? Maybe more informally. And the common practice of telling the driver to keep the change if you're paying in cash is also captured in the examples.
Okay. What about arranging a taxi in advance? Say, booking one for an early morning trip to the airport. That requires more detail.
It definitely does. That requires stating your purpose clearly when you call. I'd like to book a taxi, please. You need to specify the exact time you need it and often link it to another event, like your flight time.
Right, so they know how critical the timing is.
Exactly. An example given is, my flight is at 10 in the morning, so I think the taxi should pick me up at 7:30. You have to provide your pickup address clearly, of course. And you might need to inquire about any potential extra charges, perhaps, for having several large suitcases, or if it's a very late or early hour, it's all about communicating those specific requirements, time, place, luggage accurately to ensure the booking is correct.
Makes sense. Clear communication prevents airport panic later. Moving to owning or renting cars, that opens up a whole other set of service interactions.
Ugh.
At the car rental desk, for instance. What's the key language there?
Here, the primary language revolves around checking rates, car availability, and understanding the terms. You'd start by asking questions like, how much is it to rent an economy car, or what are your daily rates? The response might give options, $91 a day or $429 a week, perhaps mentioning different car classes, compact, sedan, SUV.
And checking the conditions, like mileage limits.
It's very important, asking directly. Is the mileage unlimited? Or is there a mileage limit? And of course, checking if the specific type of car you want is actually available for when you need it. Could I get one for tomorrow morning? Or do you have any automatic cars available?
And then comes the part everyone loves. The paperwork.
Ah, yes. A key part of the procedure. You'll definitely need to provide documentation. The dialogues mention showing your driver's license and maybe an international driving permit if you're visiting from overseas. The rental agent will ask to see them. Can I see your license and passport, please?
Standard stuff.
Then you fill out the necessary forms, the rental agreement. Payment methods are discussed. Usually credit card is required for the deposit, even if you pay the final bill in cash. It's a very procedural conversation, heavy on specific requirements, documentation language, and understanding the terms of the contract you're signing.
Okay. Now, even something as seemingly routine as filling up the car with gas or petrol has its own little conversational flow, doesn't it?
It does, especially in places where attendants still fill the tank for you. You need to specify the fuel type clearly. Fill it up with regular, please, or premium, please, or maybe $40 worth of unleaded.
And then the attendant might offer additional services.
Often, yes. The classic upsell, as you called it earlier.
Check the oil. Clean the windshield.
Pretty much. Should I check your oil? Or want me to take a look at your tires? Or do you want your windshield cleaned? The dialogues show you can politely decline if you're in a hurry, or just don't need it. No, thanks, I'm in a hurry. Or not today, thanks. Then the simple question to finish. How much is it? Or what do I owe you? It's usually a quick, functional exchange with specific vocabulary related to fuel types and basic car checks.
And parking fees. That came up in the source material, too. Sometimes that can be a point of confusion or even minor disagreement.
Yes, the sources touch on that possibility. It usually starts simply enough with the procedure. You drive up to the booth, hand over your parking ticket or card. You're informed of how long you've parked and what the hourly rate is.
Then you figure out the total.
Right. You might do the quick calculation yourself and confirm. Okay, so I was here 2 hours. That's $10, right?
But the dialogue examples show it can sometimes get a bit more involved than just paying up.
It can. Someone might react to the cost with surprise or dismay. Wow, it's so expensive. Or they might question specific rules mentioned, like a maximum stay. Wait, there's a time limit of only 3 hours. One particularly interesting moment captured in the dialogues is someone challenging the fairness of the terms, actually saying, this is an inequality clause.
Wow, using legalistic language like inequality clause in a parking lot conversation, that's quite something.
Right. It shows the range of language people might use. And the typical response from the parking attendant in such cases, according to the examples, is simply to state the policy firmly. Sorry, this is our regulation. It demonstrates how even simple transactions can occasionally involve needing to clarify rules, question costs, or even mildly challenge the terms.
Interesting. What about keeping the car looking good? Going to a car wash or a detailing shop? What kind of language comes up there?
Here, the conversation often starts with you describing a problem or requesting a specific service. An example from the source is describing damage. There is a scratch on the surface of my car, maybe pointing it out, or simply asking for a wash. Could I get a basic wash and vacuum?
Okay, straightforward request.
But then, similar to the gas station, the staff might recommend additional, more comprehensive services. They might use phrases like suggesting they give your car a thorough car care treatment, or saying they can renew your car from inside out.
Ah, another potential upsell, perhaps based on the car's condition.
Often, yes. And they usually explain why they're recommending it, sometimes using specific terms or a bit of industry jargon.
Yeah.
The dialogues mention phrases like explaining that the lacquer is shedding or the paint's luster has been lost to describe issues that need attention.
Right, so they use the specialized vocabulary.
Exactly. It becomes a conversation where The service provider uses these terms to explain the recommended service waxing, polishing, paint correction, and the customer needs to understand, or at least ask clarifying questions about what that involves, and if it's necessary, before agreeing to the extra cost.
So you might need to pick up a bit of context-specific jargon to really understand what they're offering.
It helps, definitely. Or at least be prepared to ask, what exactly does that mean? Or is that really necessary? It requires understanding or navigating the particular language of car detailing to make informed decisions about the services.
Okay. Shifting gears completely now, from cars to personal grooming. Let's talk about the barber shop or hair salon. What's the most crucial part of that interaction, based on the dialogues?
Without a doubt, the most crucial part is clearly describing what you want done to your hair. Getting that right is paramount. The barber or stylist will usually initiate this, asking something like, how would you like your hair today? Or, what are we doing for you today?
And your response needs to be clear.
Absolutely. You might give a simple instruction like, just the usual, please, or the same style as last time. Or you might state you want to change. Actually, I'd like to change my style today. They might offer visual aids, like looking through style books or pictures, for you to point out what you like.
Giving precise instructions seems absolutely vital here, probably more so than in many other service encounters.
It's paramount if you want to walk out happy. The sources provide great examples of the kind of specific instructions people give. Short on the sides and back, please, or not too much off the top, or could you just trim my beard, or cut it short around the temples? Being specific avoids misunderstandings.
Definitely. And you might request other things too.
Yes, you might ask about or request additional services while you're there, maybe a shave, a manicure, or even a facial massage, depending on the place. And of course, asking about the total cost up front, especially if you're getting multiple services, is always a good idea. How much will the cut and shave cost altogether?
Good point. Avoid surprises at the till. And the interaction usually ends with a final check, right?
Typically, yes. The barber or stylist will often hold up a mirror and ask you to look, checking if you're satisfied. Now have a look, please. Is that all right? Or how does that look? Clear communication of your desired outcome and giving specific instructions are really the core of making this interaction successful.
Okay, one more for this section. Conversations at the gym. What patterns or types of language do we see emerging there from the dialogues?
Gym conversations, based on the sources, tend to focus quite naturally on fitness goals, workout routines, and the equipment being used. People ask about each other's exercise habits. Do you often take exercise recently? Or how often do you manage to get here? Maybe hearing replies like twice a week.
And talking about the machines and weights.
Yes, using the specific terms for the equipment, like mentioning the running machine, treadmill, using dumbbells, or talking about a dynamic IC bicycle, spinning bike.
And giving advice or suggestions seems pretty common in that environment too.
Very common. People suggest activities based on someone else's stated goals or preferences. If someone says, for instance, I just want to do some light sports, nothing too intense, suggestions might include, well, yoga or maybe some bodybuilding exercises and dancing are good choices. The conversations also touch on common challenges like sticking with it. Someone might express doubt. I don't think I can hold this on consistently. And the advice given is often practical. Well, you need to make yourself a plan, stick to a schedule.
So motivational language comes into play.
Yes, definitely. And advice for specific goals too, like which particular apparatus or machines are best for bodybuilding, or maybe suggestions about diet, like the importance of eating carbohydrates for energy. There's also language used specifically for encouragement. Keep it up, or I can't wait to see your progress. It's really about sharing information, giving motivation, discussing health and fitness goals, all using that context-specific vocabulary related to exercise and well-being.
Okay, so looking back at this whole group of scenarios, the taxi, car rental, gas station, parking, car detailing, the barber, the gym, they really drive home how language adapts quite significantly to fit the specific service context.
They really do. The vocabulary used, the types of questions that get asked, the kind of information that needs to be provided, it all shifts depending on whether you're describing car trouble, explaining exactly how you want your haircut, or discussing your workout routine and goals. You really need to match your language, or at least understand the language being used within that specific domain to communicate effectively and get the outcome you want from the service provider.
Absolutely. It really highlights the importance of that context-specific language, even for what seem like routine, everyday service interactions. Okay, let's shift gears again. This time maybe to situations that carry a bit more urgency or pressure scenarios involving dealing with problems, unexpected events, or even emergencies.
Right. In these kinds of situations, clarity, accuracy, and sometimes sheer speed of communication become absolutely critical. The stakes can feel much higher, and the language used often reflects that. You might see shifts in formality or a real sense of urgency coming through. Emergency calls, like dialing 911 or the local equivalent, are a prime example.
And the source material really highlights how incredibly structured that interaction is, doesn't it?
It's highly structured for a very good reason, to get the most crucial information as quickly and efficiently as possible. It usually starts immediately with the operator identifying themselves and stating their purpose. 911, what's your emergency? Or emergency services, how can I help you? And you, the caller, need to state the nature of the emergency right away. There's been a robbery, or someone's collapsed, or there's a fire at address.
And what's the operator's absolute top priority in that situation?
Based on the dialogues analyzed, two things stand out immediately. First, trying to help the caller stay calm, using phrases like, "Okay, stay calm, miss." Panic doesn't help get information across. And second, above all else, getting the exact location.
Location, location, location.
Absolutely paramount.
Yeah.
Can you tell me your name and where you are, or what's the address of the emergency? They need specific details, street names, building numbers, apartment numbers, nearby landmarks. This is so emergency services can physically find you as quickly as possible. They'll also ask for other relevant information, of course, like the number of people involved, if anyone is injured, what exactly happened. But the whole conversational structure is relentlessly designed for maximum critical information extraction in the minimum amount of time. Location is number one.
That intense focus on location and critical details is fascinating. It's a conversational structure dictated entirely by urgency and the need for action. Okay, a less immediately life-threatening but still problematic situation is reporting a lost item, say at a lost and found office.
Right. There's less immediate pressure than a 911 call, obviously, but it still requires very clear, specific communication to be effective. The process usually starts with you stating clearly what you've lost. "Excuse me, I think I lost my backpack here earlier," or "I've lost my purse." You'll likely be asked key details to help them search their records or inventory. Crucially, when and where you think you last saw it.
And if they think they might have found something matching your description, how do you prove it's actually yours?
That's the crucial verification step. The dialogues show you'll probably be asked for your name first. Then, critically, you'll be asked to describe the item, or, even better, its contents in detail. If it's a suitcase, they might ask, "Could you tell me what's in your suitcase?" And you'd need to list specific things only you would know, maybe some clothes, some important files, and my passport.
Right. Things only the owner would know for sure.
Exactly. If it's a purse, you'd need to describe its color, the material it's made of, maybe a specific brand logo, or a distinguishing feature. It relies entirely on providing verifiable details that confirm your ownership. It's all about clear description leading to accurate verification to ensure the item is returned to the rightful person. The process usually ends with filling out a form with your contact details.
Okay, now let's look at another potentially stressful interaction. Getting pulled over by the police, perhaps for speeding or another traffic violation. That's another structured encounter, but very different from an emergency call.
It is. It's typically very formal and highly procedural. The police officer, according to the dialogues, usually initiates the interaction by immediately stating the reason for the stop, the violation they observed. They might say, "Excuse me, sir, didn't you see the red light back there?" Or, "Madam, do you know why I pulled you over? You didn't fasten your seatbelt." They often refer directly to the rule or the specific traffic sign that was violated.
And the driver's response, I imagine it's often excuses or apologies.
Frequently, yes. The dialogues capture things like, "Oh, officer, I'm so sorry, I thought I could make a right turn on red here," or claiming ignorance of the rule. "Oh, I didn't realize that was the speed limit." But the officer's language in response is generally firm, often referencing the source of the rule again. "No, sir, the sign clearly says no turn on red," or "Yes, madam, wearing a seatbelt is required according to the traffic regulations."
So excuses don't usually work. Then comes the request for documents, right?
Absolutely, standard procedure. "May I see your driver's license and vehicle registration, please?" Sometimes insurance proof, too. And then, assuming a violation occurred, the consequence is usually stated directly and formally. "I'm going to have to give you a ticket for that," or "Unfortunately, you will have to pay the fine for this." The source material notes that information on how to pay the fine or potentially appeal the ticket might also be provided at this point.
The formal procedural language from the officer really stands out there. It sets a specific tone.
It really does. It requires a precise, often minimal, and respectful response from the driver. In these examples provided in the source, attempts at lengthy pleading or arguing don't seem to alter the outcome. The interaction typically concludes with a formal closing phrase like, "Okay, please drive safely now, sir." It's a very clear sequence. Violation identified, documents checked, consequence issued, formal closing.
Now, moving from a traffic stop to an actual traffic accident that escalates the situation significantly, both emotionally and in terms of the communication needed.
It absolutely does, and the language captured in the dialogues reflects that dramatic shift. It often starts with perhaps a warning or a sudden realization escalating quickly to panic or shock. The dialogues show this progression. Maybe a warning about speed, "Hey, watch out, you're driving too fast," is ignored or happens too late, leading immediately to the moment of impact. "Hey, look out, stop the car. Oh no, I can't stop it. We just hit that man." The language then shifts instantly to checking on injuries. "Quick, let me check out how the man is." Or reporting a serious injury within the car. "My wife is seriously injured. Call an ambulance."
And then the focus shifts again to deciding the crucial next steps, who to call.
Exactly. Deciding between trying to get someone to the hospital directly or calling emergency services immediately. Will you call an ambulance and the police right now? There's also language shown around acknowledging fault, like someone taking responsibility. "Oh my God, it is entirely my fault." If a rental car is involved, the dialogue shows the process of reporting the accident to the rental company, explaining clearly what happened. "I need to report an accident. I ran into the guardrail when I turned to the right." The language shifts dramatically depending on the stage of the incident, from anticipation and warning to panic and immediate reaction, then to reporting facts, assessing injuries, and dealing with the consequences.
A very different, high-stakes kind of interaction captured vividly there. What about needing medical help yourself? Visiting a doctor or maybe going to a hospital or clinic?
This requires you, as the patient, to clearly and accurately describe your physical state, your symptoms, to the doctor or nurse. The conversation usually begins with them asking a general question like, "Okay, what's the trouble today?" Or "What seems to be the problem?" And you need to articulate your symptoms as clearly as you possibly can.
And using specific vocabulary helps here, presumably.
Yes, definitely. Examples from the source dialogues include things like, "I have a really bad cough and a sore throat," maybe mentioning a fever, "and I've been running a fever," describing pain. "I have a terrible backache," mentioning the duration. "It started 3 days ago." Or if symptoms come and go, "It seems to be recurring." Precision in describing what you're feeling, where it hurts, and for how long is really important for helping the doctor make an accurate diagnosis.
And the doctor's language in response. How do they communicate the diagnosis and treatment?
The doctor uses language to explain their diagnosis, often simplifying potentially complex medical terms for the patient's understanding. They might say something reassuring like, "Okay, it looks like you're just having a bad cold," or "Don't worry, it's not a big deal, just a minor infection."
Right.
They then give clear instructions for treatment. "I think you should go home to bed and take one of these pills." Or maybe just advice like, "Drink plenty of fluids and get a good rest." They'll specify dosage clearly if prescribing medication. Take 1 pill 3 times a day after meals.
So the conversation shifts into a more medical context, obviously, requiring the patient to provide accurate input for the doctor's diagnosis and then understand the instructions given.
Accuracy on both sides is crucial for effective medical communication. The patient's ability to describe their state directly impacts the doctor's ability to diagnose and treat effectively.
Okay. And finally, for this section on problems, let's look briefly at dealing with car repairs, communicating with a mechanic.
Right. This involves a couple of scenarios. You might be calling the garage to check on the status of your car that's already being repaired. "Hello, I'm calling about my car, the make model. Has it been mended yet?" Or you might be bringing the car in and need to describe the problem clearly to the mechanic. "Hi, the brakes in my car don't seem to be working very well." Or, "There's a strange noise coming from the engine."
And the mechanic's role in the conversation.
They'll likely ask clarifying questions to understand the issue better. When does the noise happen? All the time, or just when you accelerate? Then they diagnose the issue. One example has the mechanic realizing, I see, it looks like it's the pedals problem, and then they explain what they need to do to fix it. "Okay, I'll lubricate it for you," or "We'll need to replace the brake pads." It's essentially a diagnostic conversation where you need to describe the problem clearly and understand the proposed solution and maybe the cost involved. It can end positively, with the customer expressing satisfaction after the repair. "Wow, thank you so much. It feels much better now. You're terrific."
Great. So looking across all these problem-solving scenarios we've just discussed, the emergencies,